Hi, welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. And today we conclude our in-depth look at the year 1978 and the Beach Boys album from that year, the MIU album. When we last left 1978, it was 8 p.m. on October 28th. If you were settling in to watch TV that night, on CBS you could have caught Rhoda, Good Times, and the short-lived series American Girls. Over on ABC you could have caught Welcome Back Kotter, Carter Country, and The Love Boat, with guest stars Vincent Price, Joan Blondell, Gary Collins, Jane Keane, and Marianne Mobley. And over on NBC, Chips, starring Eric Estrada and Larry Wilcox, had been preempted for the world premiere of the film Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. It was a completely goofy movie, something like a Scooby-Doo episode, with Kiss as superheroes and Anthony Zerbe as a mad scientist menacing an amusement park. None of the band could act, and famously, Peter Criss's voice was dubbed poorly by a professional voice actor. The stunt double for Ace Frehley was clearly bigger, more muscular, and African American. And the special effects were terrible even by 70s made-for-TV movie standards, being more like something you'd see in a home movie. It was risible and embarrassing, and actually also kind of fun. Later on that Saturday night, you could have caught Dallas on CBS, Fantasy Island on ABC, or stuck with NBC for the soon-to-be-canceled new series Sword of Justice. Back on September 18th, the 4 Kiss solo albums had been released. These picture disc versions came a little bit later. This was widely seen as another way for Kiss to get money out of their fans, charging them for 4 albums instead of just 1, and of course then charging them for picture discs of those 4 albums. Of course, everybody was doing it with picture disc by the end of '78. If the disco backlash hadn't quite happened yet, the Kiss backlash was in full bloom among teenagers at this point. Some of it was overexposure due to crass marketing, and some of it was a difference in the audience that Kiss was trying to appeal to. A clue to that change came inside Kiss Alive 2. In addition to the expected Kiss Army merchandise flyer, the album included a sheet of Kiss temporary tattoos. The Kiss comic book had been launched in May of '77, and by late '78 there was the Kiss radio, Kiss lunchboxes, Kiss dolls from Mego, and of course a Kiss pinball machine. 1978 was also the year of the Kiss bubblegum cards. I'll show you my collection just quickly. Of course, as a first-year college student in 1978, I never would have bought these at the time. Like the Grease cards I showed earlier, I got these a long time later. It's all pictures of the band on stage. And here at the end, kind of cool, you get to see the wrapper that the cards came in back in '78. Around this time, I remember reading part of an interview with Gene Simmons where he admitted that the band was going for a younger demographic. He said something to the effect of, if you get a 16-year-old fan, they'll be with you for a couple of years. If you get a 7-year-old fan, you'll have them for life, which is, of course, ridiculous. Oh, and by the way, have I shown you my Monkees collection? Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park was hardly the only embarrassing TV show in the late part of 1978. About 3 weeks later, on November 17th, CBS aired the Star Wars Holiday Special. A lot has been said about this special, and I won't go into it too much here. Suffice to say, if you liked Star Wars, but felt it could benefit from B. Arthur singing, comic relief from Harvey Korman, and hearing Chewbacca's dad's fantasies about Diane Carroll, you will love this special. Turning to news, it was reported in November that California Congressman Leo Ryan and his party had been ambushed and shot while on a fact-finding mission to the People's Temple in Jonestown, Guyana. A few days later came confirmation that there had been a mass suicide in Jonestown, instigated by their leader Jim Jones. Over 900 people were dead. It seemed unbelievable then, it seems unbelievable now, and it was very much on people's minds late in 1978. A short time later, when San Francisco Mayor George Moscone and City Supervisor Harvey Milk were murdered at City Hall, it was first assumed to have some relation to the events in Jonestown, as the cult had ties in the San Francisco area. The fact that it turned out to be the work of a disgruntled former supervisor only made it slightly less disturbing. In big movie releases in the last quarter of 1978 came Midnight Express. Released in early October, it was the harrowing tale of American Billy Hayes' imprisonment in Turkey for smuggling hashish, based on Billy Hayes' book of the same name. Also in October came The Boys from Brazil, a sci-fi thriller starring Gregory Peck, Laurence Olivier, and James Mason. And Halloween, a horror movie starring Donald Pleasance, and introducing Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis's daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis, in her film debut. Also from October, Comes a Horseman, a drama set in the 1940s West, starring James Caan, Jane Fonda, and Jason Robards. In November, we got Lord of the Rings, an animated version of Tolkien's trilogy from Ralph Bakshi. Animation was clearly the only reasonable way to do a version of Lord of the Rings. It was too big and too fantastical for a live-action movie. Even then, the film was only part one of two planned films. Despite the film's success, we never got a part two. In December came Every Which Way But Loose, an action comedy starring Clint Eastwood as a brawling truck driver who for some reason has a pet orangutan. And Neil Simon's comedy California Suite with a big ensemble cast. December 15th brought the release of the season's big blockbuster, the highly anticipated Superman. There was a lot in the press about how much Marlon Brando was paid to play Jor-El, Superman's father, which was $3.7 million plus a percentage for 12 days' work, and also about the search for the actor who would portray Superman, who of course turned out to be Christopher Reeve. My personal recollection is that it was also reported that tickets for Superman would cost $5 each, which I found outrageous. I don't remember what movie tickets cost in 1978, but $5 seemed exorbitant to me. This was a time when you could still get a record for less than $4.50, so I bought a record instead of seeing Superman in December 78. Finally, in December 78 came the release of The Deer Hunter, which was the Oscar winner for Best Picture of 1978. It played at one theater in New York and a theater in LA for 1 week just for Oscar consideration, so very few people actually had an opportunity to see it in 1978. It went into wide release on February 23, 1979. And what record did I buy with the money I didn't spend seeing Superman? To tell you the truth, I don't really recall, but I'm sure whatever record store it was awash with the new craze, picture discs. We talked about picture discs a little bit back in episode 4 of the Beach Boys 1979, but I think any discussion of 1978 would be incomplete if we didn't talk about it a little bit now. To recap, by the late 70s, artists weren't turning out new product at the clip they had been in the 60s or even the early 70s. Instead of 2 new albums or even 1 new album a year, a lot of artists were taking 2 or 3 years between albums. You could easily see it in record stores. People would walk in, go through the bins of their favorite artists, find nothing new, and walk out without spending any money. It was clear there were more dollars available for records than there was product to soak it up, so someone very cleverly came up with the idea of selling colored vinyl and picture discs. Picture discs had been around for novelty records and kids records in the 40s and 50s. In 1978, it was a new thing for rock records, and the stores were soon flooded with them. Colored vinyl albums were fine. They sounded as good as regular albums since black vinyl actually is colored vinyl too. Word soon got out that picture disc didn't sound very good and in a lot of cases would get hung up or skip. Stores were soon putting up notices that picture discs could not be returned as defective if they didn't play correctly and were for decoration purposes only. Picture disc and colored vinyl continued to sell well for quite a while, though particularly during that holiday period in '78. What do you get a Beatle fan when there hasn't been a new Beatle album in 8 years? Why, of course you get them, the Sgt. Pepper picture disc. By late 1978, picture disc had really transformed the look of record stores. And what were the hot albums as 1978 came to an end? On December 23, '78, the last chart of the year, sitting at number 1 was Billy Joel's 52nd Street album. At number 2, in its third of 5 weeks in the number 2 spot, was Steve Martin's Wild and Crazy Guy. At number 3 was Barbra Streisand's Greatest Hits Volume 2. It would go to number 1 on the next chart, January 6, 1979. Chic's C'est Chic album was at its number 4 peak. The Grease soundtrack was still hanging in at number 5. This had, of course, been number 1 for 9 weeks during the summer and was one of 2 albums that were still in the top 10 from the beginning of the quarter. At number 6 was Foreigner's Double Vision album, which was the other album from the beginning of the quarter still in the top 10 when it had been at its number 3 peak. Queen's Jazz album was number 7. It would top out at number 6 on January 6th. Live and More by Donna Summer was at number 8. It would go to number 1 on January 11th. And number 9 was The Best of Earth, Wind and Fire, Volume 1. This would go to number 6 on January 27th. And rounding out the top 10 was Eric Clapton's Backless. This would go to number 8 on January 13th. And the top 10 singles as the year ended, at number 1 was Le Freak by Chic. Number 2 was the Bee Gees' Too Much Heaven. It would be number 1 on January 6th following Le Freak. You Don't Bring Me Flowers by Barbra Streisand and Neil Diamond was at number 3. It had been number 1 on December 2nd for 2 weeks before Le Freak. My Life by Billy Joel was at number 4. It would peak at number 3 on January 6th. Alicia Bridges' I Love the Nightlife was at its number 5 peak. Gino Vanelli's I Just Wanna Stop was at number 6. It had been number 4 on December 9th. Sharing the Night Together by Dr. Hook was at number 7. It would go to number 6 on January 6th. YMCA by the Village People was at number 8. It would go to number 2 on February 3rd. Andy Gibbs' Our Love, Don't Throw It Away was at its number 9 peak. And at number 10 was Toto with their first big hit, Hold the Line, which would eventually reach number 5 on January 20th. Albums still climbing the chart at year-end included Nicolette by Nicolette Larson. The album had been released at the end of September. Her cover of Neil Young's Lotta Love was a hit in December of '78. The album went to number 15 early in '79. Also, Olivia Newton-John's Totally Hot would go to number 7 early in 1979. The Blues Brothers' Briefcase Full of Blues album would go to number 1 on February 3rd. And Rod Stewart's Blondes Have More Fun would go to number 1 on February 10th. Energy by the Pointer Sisters was on the rise. Their hit single Fire, written by Bruce Springsteen, would go to number 2 on February 24th, and the album would go to number 13 in March. Kenny Rogers' The Gambler would go to number 12 in March. And Legend by Poco moved to number 14 following their hit single Crazy Love, which would go to number 17 on March 31st. Love Tracks by Gloria Gaynor with the number 1 hit I Will Survive would peak at number 4 on March 31st. The single would hit number 1 on March 10th. The Jacksons' Destiny album would go to number 11 in the spring of '79, and the Doobie Brothers' Minute by Minute album would go to number 1 for 5 weeks beginning on April 7th. Showing that new wave would be a force to be reckoned with in '79. The Dire Straits album would begin climbing the charts after Sultans of Swing becomes a hit in February of '79. The album would eventually go to number 2 on April 14th, right behind Minute by Minute. And Blondie's Parallel Lines album would go to number 6 on April 28th, the same day their single Heart of Glass reaches number 1. Also, Peaches and Herb's 1978 album Too Hot would peak at number 2 on May 5th, the same day their single Reunited begins a 5-week run at number 1. And what of our old friends the Beach Boys in these waning months of 1978? In September, Brothers Studios had been sold, and that same month, Brian and Marilyn finally split. Brian went to Miami to work on the first Beach Boy album for CBS Records. Of course, we know he was in no shape to produce, so Bruce Johnston was quickly brought in to handle production duties. After completing their tour with Jan and Dean on September 4th, the Beach Boys' live performances were limited to a handful of shows in October. They spent the last 3 months of the year winding up work on the Light album, their first album for CBS, and it was announced in the press with some fanfare that it would include a 12-minute disco version of one of the songs from Wild Honey. Finally, let's wind up our 1978 deep dive with a look at the TV shows in the last quarter of 1978. Tuesday nights on ABC was still the place to be with 3 of the 4 top 10 shows. Still at number 1 was Laverne and Shirley. Three's Company was at number 2. The new show, Mork and Mindy, which had debuted on September 14th, was already at number 3. It kicked off ABC's Thursday night lineup. Happy Days was at number 4. The CBS News Magazine 60 Minutes was at number 5. MASH was at number 6, still drawing high ratings in its 7th season. All in the Family was at number 7. Now, without Mike and Gloria in the cast, the series got its own Cousin Oliver in the form of 9-year-old Stephanie Mills, portrayed by Danielle Brisebois. At number 8 was Taxi, a new, highly regarded, and highly rated sitcom. It had been given a prime spot on ABC following the top-rated shows Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, and Three's Company on Tuesday nights. At number 9 was 8 is Enough, a family comedy drama in its second full season Wednesday nights on ABC. And at number 10 was Charlie's Angels, still in the top 10 in its third season, still on ABC Wednesday nights following 8 is Enough. During these shows, just in time for the holidays, you might have caught a commercial for The Handle, the new easy-to-use camera by Kodak. The commercials featured a pitch from Dick Van Dyke on the beach and music by Celebration featuring Mike Love. It was a rewrite of Fun, Fun, Fun. She'll have fun, fun, fun with The Handle made by Kodak all day. Earlier in the evening, when advertising time was cheap, you might have seen a commercial for one of the dumbest products ever created, Mr. Microphone by Ronco, just in time for the holidays. It was a microphone that, if adjusted just perfectly, would broadcast your voice through a radio as long as you were within about 2 feet of it. It was said it was used by professional musicians, and people seemed to be having a great time hearing their voice repeated through a radio they were standing right next to. One of its demonstrated uses was shouting at women on the street through your car radio. Hey, good looking, we'll be back to pick you up later. A great Christmas gift for only $14.88. On December 31st, 1978, Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve was hosted by Eric Estrada of Chips and Lauren Tweez, Julie, your cruise director, from The Love Boat. Musical guests included Chuck Mangione, Rick James, Barry Manilow, and the Village People. That must have been some after party. It's hard to believe nobody got turned into a pillar of salt. The special was brought to you by Dr. Pepper. Be a pepper, drink Dr. Pepper. It would be hard to think of a more fitting way to say goodbye to the year 1978. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive into 78 through all these episodes. I hope you found it fun and enjoyable. Please comment. We'll move on to some Beach Boy topic from another era next time. Looking forward to that. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye.